are today at Anthony's Bank and we've got amazing open skies and a lovely beach. If you go down this way, it's down to Humberston Fitties, and this way takes you down to Cleethorpes Pier and the Leisure Centre. We're here today to explore the wildlife with Ashley from Lincolnshire Outdoor Learning. We usually come to the beach to build sandcastles, but there's so much more to explore. Now for some history. If you look out there, you can see the Hailsand Fort, and there's the Bull Fort. They were used in the Second World War to protect us from invasion. They're 100 years old and they're not used anymore, but when they were, they could hold up to 200 soldiers. If you look right over there on the other side of the Humber estuary, you can see Spurn Point. And if you look really closely, you can see the lighthouse. Now we're going to meet Ashley and see what we can find on the beach. Hi Ashley, what have you found here?
Becky, this is a seaweed and it's called bladderwrack, and you'll see that it's got air sacs in pairs where there's two together, and these air sacs help the seaweed to float when it's in the water so it can get to the surface and gain energy from the sun through photosynthesis.
What's photosynthesis?
Well Becky, it's a big word, and photo means light, and so the plants actually get energy from the sun through this form of photosynthesis, using the light to make energy and food for the plants.
Wow, what's this?
Well Becky, this is hornwrack, and although it looks like a seaweed, it's actually a collection of small, tiny microscopic animals.
Wow. Oh look, I think it's a cockle shell.
Fantastic. Yeah, it's got two shells. Looks like this one's been eaten by the oyster catcher bird, but people can eat cockles as well.
Most of the shells we find on the beach used to contain little sea creatures, and what you can see is the empty shell. This one's a periwinkle shell. It may have been washed down from Yorkshire, as it's not very common in Lincolnshire, as it likes to live on rocky shores. The creature you'll find inside it likes to eat bladderwrack seaweed. This is a razor shell, and it's called a razor shell because it looks like an old-fashioned razor that men use to shave with. You'll often find these empty shells on Cleethorpes Beach. They usually contain a clam, which is a sea creature that buries itself into the sand. This is a whelk shell, and it's one of the largest shells you'll find on the beach. The whelk is a sea snail. The tellin is a small, pretty and smooth triangular shaped shell. Lots of different birds like to eat the creature that's inside. Who knew this was called a sea lettuce? It's a type of seaweed, and it's usually found attached to rocks or living in rock pools. Here's some floating in the water. Look how similar it is to the piece of plastic bag also floating in the sea. This shows how important it is not to litter, because birds and other creatures might try to eat your rubbish. So we've just learned all about things that you can find along the strand line, and it's called the strand line because things get stranded along it. Now let's go and check out the nature reserve and the sand dunes. So tell us about the importance of the sand dunes.
Well, here at the sandy beach, of course, there's a lot of sand about, and ordinarily the sand would just get blown around the beach. But the grasses here, the sand dune grasses, actually hold the sand together with their roots, and you'll see that the sand starts to build up until you get these dune systems starting to form. And so these are also important for sea defence, to protect the beach huts and the houses along the coastline. But with issues of sort of climate change and sea levels rising, there is a possibility that some of these sand dunes can get washed away. So the saline lagoon is an important part of this nature reserve for the small invertebrate animals that live in the lagoon. These are small, tiny animals without backbones. A lot of the birds will feed on them, but there's certain species in there that are actually really nationally important, and this has become one of the top sort of 3 saline lagoons in the country. And so the word saline means salty because we're right next to the sea. It does get seawater that comes in, and so that's the salty part of the word. And a lagoon is like a large lake, and so it's a salty seawater lake.
Thanks again to Ashley from Lincolnshire Outdoor Learning. We've learnt some fascinating stuff about the Cleethorpes coastline. Make sure that you come along and check it out for yourselves.